Well, thank you, Jamie and Maureen. The foundation engages some of the smartest, most creative, big-hearted people I've ever known, and that includes everyone in this room and so many others. Our mission is simple. It's to inspire greater giving and build stronger communities. That mission comes to life every day when a nonprofit serves more people because of a grant that we've made. When a student enters college on a scholarship, even though no one in their family had ever had the opportunity to do that. It happens when we connect donors with the doers in this state to do great things. You know, this foundation has both the privilege and the awesome responsibility to act today while always thinking about the future. We focus not on the next quarter or the next year or the next political cycle, God help us, but on the next generation. Act today, think about tomorrow. And that's why we've spent the last year developing New Hampshire Tomorrow, a comprehensive plan to help thousands of children achieve their full potential. New Hampshire Tomorrow brings together hundreds of organizations, individuals, and coalitions and businesses toward a single goal, and that is to increase opportunities so more young people are ready to contribute to our communities, to our way of life, and to our workforce. The foundation will commit $100 million to this effort over the next decade. We are investing in these 4 areas you see on the screen from cradle to career. We'll do it by making high-impact strategic grants, by building and supporting multi-sector coalitions, and by advancing sensible public policy and public investment. The publication on your table explains much more about how we're going to do it, and in just a little while you'll hear from some of my colleagues about a bit more on the detail. But what I'd like to do is remind you a little bit on the why. As New Hampshire's population ages and in-migration slows, all of our kids must get the chance to achieve their full potential. But right now, only some do get that chance. The renowned scholar Robert Putnam calls this the opportunity gap, as Jamie opened. Many of you were right here in this room last year to hear Bob speak. But what does that actually mean? It means that kids from lower income families have less access to quality preschool, less access to youth sports and other enrichment activities, less access to trusted adult mentors in their lives, less access to post-secondary education. Putnam calls these airbags. They were all there for most of us in this room. They're not there for way too many kids. All those opportunities that we know help kids grow into productive, self-sufficient adults. That's just unfair. And it also doesn't make sense economically, as our businesses struggle to find qualified young employees. So this is not just a social obligation, it's an economic imperative. So there are many ways to illustrate the opportunity gap with data, and I'm just going to show you 3 of these. In each one, as you look at these slides, the national trend is shown as a solid line, and the New Hampshire trend is dotted, and you'll see the shape of these. Putnam calls these scissor graphs. This income gap is familiar to us all. And 1, there's no question it's growing, and 2, the gap is somewhat sharper in New Hampshire than it is in other parts of the US as a whole. But income disparity doesn't just happen in a vacuum. There are root causes, and among those root causes is the opportunity gap. So for example, at a time when our economy demands a more educated workforce, too few poor kids continue education past high school. The best predictor today of whether a student completes a post-secondary degree is the size of their parents' bank account, not the size of their own ambition and intellect. In short, less talented rich kids are finishing college more frequently than really smart poor kids. Once again, neither fair nor wise. You're going to hear from Richard Reeves today about a challenging concept, and that's the impact of family structure on social mobility and opportunity. Although many single parents do a phenomenal job raising their children, we simply have to pay attention to the data, which shows us, for example, parents with only a high school degree are far more likely to be raising children alone. That contributes to the lack of opportunity, and the cycle continues. There are other trends that we've talked about over the last year that underscore the critical importance, especially for this state, in investing in young people. Slower in migration, an aging population, third oldest median age in the country. Those two things together, there's simply fewer kids in New Hampshire, simply fewer kids. And more of them are growing up in poverty. Our students carry the highest student debt load in America, and businesses already can't find skilled young people to fill well-paying jobs. You're going to hear that a lot today. According to the Center for Public Policy Studies, I think Steve Norton's here, the state could see a 10% decline in our workforce in the coming years. We have jobs. We need to fill the skill gap to fill those jobs. So here's the thing. These data are not destiny. We can get in front of these trends, but only if we act now, and that's what we're doing. New Hampshire Tomorrow seeks to narrow this opportunity gap with strategic investments in 4 proven focus areas. Early childhood development to make sure that every kid has access to high-quality preschool and early care. Family and youth supports, including mentoring, after-school programs, and parenting classes. Effective prevention, treatment, and recovery programs so we don't lose young people to the disease of addiction. And creating diverse and affordable pathways from education to career to meet the needs of employers and empower more young people to earn a good living and lead self-sufficient lives. Now, for all of these, we have very specific strategies, we have measurable outcomes, we have priorities, we have success measures for these 4 focus areas. After Richard speaks, you're going to hear a few examples from my colleagues on what those are, and there's a lot more detail in this publication and at nhcf.org about how we are going to show whether we're closing this opportunity gap. But here it is in one page. Our goal is nothing less than ensuring that all of New Hampshire kids have the opportunity to reach their full potential. We'll know we have succeeded when a steadily growing number of young adults have the education, the skills, and the earning power to contribute to our economy and to the health of our communities. This work has been developed in partnership with hundreds of passionate, thoughtful people who know and love our state. And 24 of them have agreed to serve on a special leadership council to guide the work of New Hampshire Tomorrow. And this morning I've asked 3 of them, Dianne Mercier, Jeremy Hitchcock, and Donnalee Lozeau, to say a few words about why they've signed up. So why don't you 3 come up, grab a seat, and we'll start with Dianne.
Sorry. We don't know what we're doing. That's all right.
Good morning. So I know very crisply what our job here is. It's to provide access to meaningful work. That's our ultimate goal, I believe. I was on a panel a few weeks ago, and we were asked this inevitable question. How do you achieve a good work-life balance? And the panel decided upon this. I just don't know how to answer that question because I don't fundamentally understand it. There is no difference between meaningful work and a meaningful life. Meaningful work is a component of meaningful life. Nobody ever asks, how do I achieve a successful family life balance? Or how do I achieve my most passionate interest life balance? Because these are essentially part of us. In order to have a meaningful life, you must have meaningful work, and they're not separate from each other. I think when Dick and the Charitable Foundation talk about the work that we're doing here now, Dick talks about it in terms of a social and ethical and moral imperative. But if that doesn't grab you, he's explained that it is also an economic imperative. And I would suggest to you, again, we should be careful about separating these things. They are not separate from each other. If something is a moral and ethical imperative, it is also an economic imperative. And so whichever one you gravitate towards, it's okay, because the most important word in that is imperative. So I'll share with you, because as Maureen said, we all bring our own personal history to this. I will share with you my history. In 1992, I was making $26,000 a year. I had a $120,000 mortgage. Interest rates were about 12% then. I had 2 children under the age of 4, and my husband at the time suffered from both mental illness and addiction. I did not have a college degree. I had no idea how poor or how vulnerable I was. But as you might imagine, it was not the life I had envisioned for myself when I was a girl. And it was most certainly not the life that I had envisioned for my children. And so I had determined that the most important thing that I could do was to be independent and provide for myself and my family in a way that I could not do in my current situation. I needed affordable childcare. I was very blessed that I lived in a big city and the Boys and Girls Club was there. They saved my children, and they made it possible for me and saved me in my life. I needed a college degree. And so I was fortunate that I had an employer that provided both tuition assistance and took a big chance on me and offered me a position that required a degree ahead of that degree, as long as I promised that I would get that degree, which I did, and they did. And I had a great local college that was able to provide me with a flexible learning schedule. It took me 11 years to finish it. My children were at my graduation, which was awesome. And the rest, as they say, is history. But if you recall that glide path and those 4 buckets, I needed every one of them. And they are the reason that I'm standing here today, able to talk to you, good people, about this important work. But I also want to share with you that I never felt like the mother of at-risk children, which is the mission of the Boys and Girls Club. I never felt like an employee to my employer. And I never felt like a student at my school. I felt like all of these people were helping me as a person. I didn't feel like they were at this mission of helping people. I felt like they were helping me. And so the way I attached myself to this is that I don't want to help people through this initiative. I want to help a person in the way that I was helped. So thank you, Dick. Thank you.
How many of you have had an opportunity to see Robert Putnam talk about the opportunity gap? it is really difficult to describe that problem any more crisply than he does. And when there's the age difference between myself and the average age in the audience. But when I think about generationally, and that's probably the fundamental point that has stuck with me, is that this is a generational issue. And New Hampshire has many advantages. It's been great for myself, the company that I work for, my family, the employees that we have. But I also think of it as there is really no other institution that I can think of in the state of New Hampshire that is thinking beyond a year, 2 years, a political cycle. And it is actually just a complete tragedy that there isn't this forward thinking, except but this New Hampshire tomorrow. I have 3 young kids, 6, 4, and 3, and we have a wonderful environment and community. But the other thing that really struck me hearing Putnam speak was about our kids and the whole notion about my kids and my kids having a good opportunity, and our kids, our collective kids, your kids, my kids, some kids that I don't know. And that difference between helping people and helping a person is also something that really resonates with me, is that we have a position, an opportunity, an imperative to do the work that's necessary to make differences in these structural challenges that we're facing. I mean, I think about myself as an entrepreneur, and it's French for risk-taking. And I really want to commend the work that we're doing here as really something we're putting ourselves out there. We're saying that this is a systemic problem. We've come up with what are the issues that exist, so the solutions. And my goodness, I hope we hit the mark, because if we don't, there's bad stuff that will happen. And that'll mean that all of our kids will not have the opportunities that we have collectively had, the high per capita income, the safety, just the wonderful community that we have. But I know that our collective work together will be able to make a big difference. And finally, I think that there is something that we have seen manifest in our communities in all of these different areas. We joke about the political debates and the climate as being really nasty. And well, you may look at that and say, well, politicians should just be more civil, and our discourse should be more civil. But I actually think that that's an outcome of a real issue that has been brewing for essentially a generation, which is that for a huge group of people, left or right, Republican, Democrat, there's a lot of angst out there. There's a lot of people who are unhappy, who have not seen changes in their socioeconomic outcome, and as a result, those efforts sometimes manifest itself in very negative ways. And I think of this as probably the most positive way to look at these structural issues, bring us all together, and really make a difference for our children. So I'm very excited about the leadership role and the New Hampshire for Tomorrow, because I look forward to seeing it and living it with all of you. Thank you.
I already told Tim to give me the 2-minute warning, because once I get started. Well, good morning. It's my honor to be here today. The Charitable Foundation always does such remarkable work. Having served on the board, I was always amazed by what would happen when the quality of the staff and their thoughtfulness came together with a group of volunteers that had those same skills. The things that could happen and the discussions that took place have always been quite remarkable, and I'm sure that they still are. As Dianne said and Maureen said, we all do have a story. Life is complicated, families are complicated, the roads to get places are different than they used to be. Like Dianne, I didn't know what I didn't know at the time. So my mother had 5 children. My father died when I was 2. I was number 4 out of 5. I really didn't, know much about, how all of that took place. I was in my 20s before I really found out the story of how all of that played out. But what I knew was I had a mom who got out of school and was pulled out of school in 5th grade because French Canadians, that's what you did. You worked, you did what had to be done. And, but my mother always made me feel like, well, you can still be what you want. There was a pride about what we were trying to overcome together. Kids in my time as a youth did not know that they were poor. They really didn't. You had a mix of friends, you know, you just that some kids had more stuff than you had. It wasn't so noticeable. Today's kids know, and they're angry about it, and they don't understand. And as Jeremy was saying, the discourse really is about, because it's always easier to find somebody to blame than to solve the problem. It's always easier to say somebody else put me here, or somebody took a job from me, or somebody came to our country, or somebody, you know, didn't give us what we were entitled to. I went to Head Start, which interestingly enough turned out to be at the same agency that I'm now the executive director of. Go figure. Maureen and I talked about that over lunch. It's like, how cool is that? So like Maureen, when I see the children coming out of Head Start, and instead of on top of me, they're downstairs, and I see them run out, I look at them and think one of them could be here someday. And I think one of the things that's most remarkable about this work that this endeavor is out to achieve is, as Jeremy said, it's beyond this quick, easy fix. It's beyond feeding somebody tomorrow. It's beyond heating their house this winter. It's beyond all of that. It's about breaking that cycle that people just don't know how to break. As I tell people, when you're raising your children and you hear your mother's words come out of your mouth and you go, oh. Well, for most of us, that ends up being a pretty good thing, right? But we have parents raising children whose words that came out of their parents' mouth are the wrong words. But they don't know that because they don't know better. They don't know that talking to their child when the child can't talk back, it's probably as good as it gets, no, is really important for that child and their development. When I would come home with our 3 children and had a day full of children, I would look at my husband and say, Mommy's going in timeout, you're on, right? Parents that are raising our children today don't have that. They don't have somebody to hand off to catch a breath, to think about. They don't have somebody that it's okay to be themselves in and say, I don't know what to do with. So they ignore and they move to the next day and they worry about the problem right in front of them. So these items that we're talking about, that we look to do something about, are all important building blocks to breaking the cycle of poverty. The agency that I work at, we're 50 years serving this community. They started in 1965 through an act of Congress, apparently back when they talked to each other in a different way. And it was actually the first time that the phrase was coined, war on something, and it was the war on poverty. Now, some have said, apparently, you have failed. I don't feel that way. I look at me and think, okay, some might think I'm a success, some maybe not so much. Hope it doesn't reflect poorly on Head Start. But what we have done is change people's lives. There's just more than anybody can do. And it's, again, like I said, it's more about looking forward, believing what's possible. Fundamentally, community action believes that anybody, when exposed to an opportunity, regardless of their income, can succeed. And the same thing that I share with Dianne and with Maureen and others probably in this room is, as I was growing up, as my mother remarried the downtown beat cop in Nashua who was foolish enough to marry a woman with 5 children, I knew that I had chances, that I had opportunity, that I could be whatever I wanted to be. When I look today at the presidential race that's playing out, having been an elected official, it is heartbreaking in a country like ours to see our national stage look the way it does, and I don't really care whose side anybody's on. And that's why so many people don't run, and so many people don't do things. It is important that people see things in you and give you the opportunity to know that you can succeed. When I went in the legislature at 24, and Donna Sitek saw something in me and put me on the Judiciary Committee and thought that I had a bright future, how fortunate was I? When my father married my mother and said, you can be anything you want to be, how fortunate was I? When I ran for higher office and was told I could do it, and it happened, and I became mayor of the city that I grew up in, wow, you know, how fortunate was I? But every step of the way, somebody told me that they saw something in me. And all of our kids have something in them. And the most that this group can do is find people, because all it takes is one, to tell a child that they can be all that they can be. And for those teachers that tell children that they can't, and they won't, and they don't, and they push them along, and they don't help them to figure out who they are, shame on them. We need to inspire our teachers to believe in our children even when they're tired, and we have to inspire our children to believe in themselves. This work can get us there. Thank you all for giving us an opportunity to share it with you.
So a bank president, one of our state's most successful high-tech entrepreneurs, employers, civic servant, 3 of hundreds and hundreds of people around New Hampshire are coming together through New Hampshire Tomorrow. Thank you all, stepping up as partners and as advisors and as donors. So what's next with this initiative? We will expand this partnership. We'll reach out to more businesses and civic groups. We'll bring to scale the state's best programs by the state's most effective nonprofits and public-private partnerships. We'll work with school districts, with community colleges, with universities, and we'll collaborate with the public sector. And we have started a new New Hampshire Tomorrow Fund. I'm delighted to announce that in a very short amount of time, a handful of visionary, generous, inaugural donors, some of whom are with us today, have helped us get well past $1 million in that fund in 2016, and we're going to keep going. So in short, we're setting out today to build a stronger, better New Hampshire tomorrow.